inspiring quotes can get rather tiresome. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Mere Mortals Book Reviews. I'm your host here, Kyron, live on the 20th of November, 2024. We're getting towards the end of the year, and as you might surmise, this is the podcast where I tell you my daily plans for the next calendar year. We're going to go into every single day of what I'm doing next year. Okay, no, we're not going to be doing that, but we do have a bit of daily wisdom and a calendar in this book coming up for today, which is A Calendar of Wisdom by Leo Tolstoy. So this was published in 1906 originally and is 384 pages in length. Took me about 4 hours of reading in total to get through, I would say. And it's a compilation of modified quotes that Mr. Tolstoy had collated over a series of years, and it's set into the days of the year. So it will say January 1st at the top of one page, and then it will have a series of quotes going down, typically between 4 to 6 that go through this. And each is kind of related to a subject and a theme that he has chosen for that day. Now, common occurrences of these themes will be stuff like religion, love, good and evil, morals, vegetarianism, self-improvement, etc., etc. It goes on. Some will be a small little snippet of just a random thing you wouldn't really expect to occur, and then the rest would tend to center around these main big ideas, I guess, that he followed and were in his life. Now, the quotes are sourced widely from notable individuals around the world. There's a couple that are smaller ones where you might go like, oh, I've never really heard of that person, or it seems a bit obscure. But it's really condensed into the format that Tolstoy desired as well. So they're not really big quotes. Typically, I would be surprised if any of them were longer than 3 sentences long, to be honest. Some of them, a couple of ones from the Bible, maybe a paragraph, maybe. But in general, what you could expect to fit on a page was basically it. So, that's pretty much it for the introduction. Let's jump into the theme, some of the questions. So I'll go over some of the basic principles that you can actually get from this book. But we're not going to explore any theme in depth because there's nothing in particular. It would be too hard to really do that. It was all over the place, and nothing actually really stood out for me. So instead, we're going to go into a question, and the question for today is: what are quotes like these useful for everyday life? So it's a calendar of wisdom, and these quotes are not necessarily meant to be inspirational, but meant to give you, I suppose, like thoughts to ponder, something to think about as you go about your daily life, and probably to make you a better person, I would say. So the broad themes, we'll go over it just for the sake of knowing, I guess, what Tolstoy was about, who he was as a person, and that will then allow us to explore are these thoughts, these little jots of wisdom, any use for our daily life. So going over a couple I talked about, religion. So basically his interpretation of this was these are required for rules on how to live, but also to be looked at with a bit of caution, because you can go too far and they can be a strict adherence that lead you astray. So he was really advocating, I guess, like a middle path for religion, but also seemed very, very important to his life. And I think he was relatively undogmatic about what religion in particular, just that you had a religion, although it didn't really touch on theism and, whether you can have one god or multiple gods or anything like that. So I believe he was Orthodox Christian, so take that for what it is. Vegetarianism, he had a very strong stance on that killing and eating meat is done for pleasure, and for pleasure only, from what I could tell. And killing animals is extinguishing life, and therefore, if you combine these two precepts together, you get that eating meat is moral. A lot of ways that you could perhaps argue against this. I'm not going to bother, but that was certainly his stance, and the quotes that he had in this book were from notable vegetarians as well. Non-violence, so war only produces suffering and hurts all. kind of patriotism as a sneaky mechanism for coercion. He didn't particularly think that being patriotic was a good thing. And that those promoting war are usually profit, and to be careful and suspicious of those promoting war. And then it was also violence just in general against your neighbor, against certain individuals. This probably also would lead into anger, and why anger isn't a useful thing to really have in your life nor contemplate, or something that should be avoided, or at least noticed if it's coming up in you. We have intellect, so reason is beautiful and stupidity is ugly. That was basically the what I could get from that. Good and evil, I'm not going to even really try and touch on that. Super complicated. So yeah, he certainly had a whole bunch of thoughts on good and evil in these quotes to reflect that. And then finally, the meaning of life, which was usually found within the list above, to be honest. There was nothing, I think, particularly insightful about what the meaning of life is, where to find it, how to get it, who has the answers. It kind of seemed, he didn't exactly say you need to create it for yourself. I think he would probably have said that there was something a bit more substantial to it than that. But it also seemed to be very individual and based on personhood. Now, that does not cover everything in this book. There was 365 pages. I don't think he covered the leap year of February 29. Maybe he did, so maybe there would be 366. And that was pretty much what you're going to find within this book. So lots of snippets, quotes, and they all tend to be grouped around certain days and things. So is this useful? How could you apply this to your daily life? Would this make you more wise if you read this? What's the kind of use for a book like this? So I'm going to just start off with a little flashback to my past. Go back into 2014, 2015, 2016, Kyron. So a decade ago. And I was working in the mining industry, and it was a rather not a hard job, but it just you'd have to wake up early. I hate waking up early. It was rather monotonous. There was always this weekly plan that had to be get done. It wasn't a fulfilling job for me personally. It wasn't the worst thing ever, but neither was it the best. So it was kind of just like I was dredging my way through life in essence. And I certainly would have preferred spending my time on multiple other things. Now, I actually developed a little list for myself of quotes. I actually sourced this list from a very cool website called, I think, Zen Pencils. So if you just type in Zen Pencils, it was basically a cartoonist who he would create these cartoon panels, and he would kind of set them to a quote by a notable individual. And it was really interesting. He'd have these recurring characters. He'd have the, putting life and visual imagery to a lot of the quotes. And some of the quotes were actually ones that you can find within a calendar of wisdom. And I found that really, really cool and interesting. And some of these quotes I did find rather inspirational, motivational, and full of wisdom. And so I actually created a bit of a worksheet with these quotes, and I would read them out to myself in the mornings. And so some of the ones from this would be Rupert Kipling's If. There was kind of like an old tale about, there's two wolves inside of you. One is anger, hate, blah, 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 blah. The other is good, love, and kindness. Which wolf is going to win? Well, it's the one that you feed. All of these sorts of things. There's multiple different types of ones in there. It would take me too long to go over all of those. And I would read them to myself in the morning, and I found it a bit motivational. It was a good focus at the start of the day, but honestly, it was kind of a cope to just not be unhappy and tired right at the start of the morning is how I use these things. So a book like this, which is full of quotes like this, are you going to get wisdom from this? Yeah, I think these are nice to reaffirm perhaps what you already believe in. If you were, a 10-year-old reading this book, a 15-year-old, you haven't got much life experience, So you don't really know what the world is about, how to interpret things, how you should act in the world. I'm not sure this book is going to be particularly good because there's a lot of set in stone things in this. If you are a natural born fighter and can make your living, your life through MMA, this book's not going to be helpful because there's a whole bunch of in here about non-violence. If you're the type of person who a carnivore diet works really well with, this book is not going to be helpful for you. You're not going to get much out of this. In fact, it will be detrimental to you because you will perhaps interpret some of these things as 100%. This is what life is like, and this is true wisdom. To have a good life, I must follow these precepts that Leo Tolstoy has kind of laid out here from a lot of famous authors, and we'll talk about them in a second. So it's nice to reaffirm what you already believe, but I think the hard work has already been done behind the scenes of how you came to these beliefs. So he wrote this book very much for himself, kind of in the sense of a Marcus Aurelius Meditations. He wrote it for himself. This was his daily musings on life, kind of. But in this case, Tolstoy actually published it, and it seemed to be very relatively successful. Sold, I think it was like 300,000 copies in Russia at the time. So it did well, but none are particularly convincing in their own right in terms of the quotes. If you're looking to cement a belief, this is probably the type of thing that might be useful, something to think about. So I feel this was a book that was very individual to Tolstoy, and much like I created my own one, and it had its purpose and was useful for a while. I certainly wouldn't think that this is the kind of thing where you wake up every day and it's like the book that is going to be the best one of your life. I think it has a very small subset of people who would find something like this useful, a daily affirmation, whether you read it in the morning, in the evening, or in the night, who knows? But I'm not sure as a general book for everyday living for that normal people have. I'm not sure it's going to be that useful because a lot of the stuff in here is not that actionable. So this is getting on to my next section. Let's talk about the author and some extra details. So Tolstoy, I've talked about him in other reviews before, in particular parts of his life and things like that. So we'll just leave it that he was a Russian icon of the 1800s, one of the best well-known Russian authors, War and Peace, Anna Karenina. The book that I've reviewed on here has been The Death of Ivan Ilyich, which is a collection of short stories from him. Go check out that review if you want to know more. But was he the author of this book? Well, kind of, but also not. So he collected these quotes over 15 years, and he'd abbreviate them, condense them, manipulate them, move words around, and I would just say generally tweak them as a whole. So most of these quotes are from people of renown, but also smaller ones. So here's a bunch of list of them off. Marcus Aurelius, I just talked about him. Cicero, Confucius, Lao Tzu, from the Tao Te Ching, reviewed that on this channel before. Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Rousseau, so that's the famous kind of intellectual from the French Revolution. Henry David Thoreau, American intellectual, notably from Walden. He had quotes from the Talmud, the Quran, the Bible, the Dhammapada, so some of the classic religious texts of all time, and so therefore the authors of these would be people like Paul the Apostle, Jesus, Muhammad, ancient Indian, Sanskrit writers, law. I don't know, or it was literally from everywhere. These quotes, so you get a very worldly spattering because he didn't seem to, there was just from there. You've got Asia covered, you've got North America covered. Probably missing a little bit of South America and Africa in terms of total, but he was writing this in the 1800s, so he probably didn't have that much access to a lot of the writings from those nations being translated into English or Russian. I'm not sure if he spoke English. In any case, I think he probably would have. That's probably a good question. Was this book written in English? I'm actually not too sure. I can bring this up right now. An English translation of the second Russian edition was done in 1911. So yes, it would have originally been published in Russian. And so that gets us on to, I guess, what my interpretation of the book was and what I came into this book kind of expecting. So I wanted to know more about Tolstoy and his interests, and I wanted a book that would kind of explore this about Tolstoy. So, probably I honestly should have gone for a biography of him. That probably would have been the better solution. But I didn't, and so I started this book, and I'm like, okay, this is actually kind of interesting, a unique format for a book. I haven't really seen this before. Set out with the days of the years, and so it had a really nice bait and switch at the start. January 1st, so it's the start of the book, right? You're expecting him to come out hard-hitting, perhaps about religion, perhaps about love, who knows what it's going to be about. And it was actually about books. So all the January 1st was just about books and kind of how to read books properly or correctly, the art of reading in essence. And I went, oh, that's actually a pretty useful. That's kind of the thing that I would actually be more interested in. And that kind of got to what I expected would be almost daily quotes of daily advice on how to live. And it would be, greeting people in the street, being, how to say hello to neighbors, or a reminder to say hello to your neighbors, little tricks, thoughts on random X topic. Instead, it got into the meat of the more theoretical spiritual things rather quickly. And so it was certainly less actionable than I thought it would be. A daily calendar of wisdom. Sure, I get that wisdom is generally touching upon deeper, higher order subjects perhaps. But for me, I was certainly thinking that, okay, this is going to be more actionable. It's going to have more daily things, more on the daily side than the wisdom side is certainly what I was expecting. So this gets us onto our similar book, perhaps some recommendations. This is a rare book review for a couple of reasons. I'm not a compilation guy. Short stories of compilations, things like that. Yeah, not up my alley. And this one was, a compilation of quotes of all things. And quotes are like, they don't really get you anywhere. You're 2 sentences in and then they're finished. So it generally doesn't interest me. The Tolstoy name attracted me, but the general themes were probably too lofty for everyday life. Better suited perhaps for retired people who have mostly sorted out their life and have time to daydream or think endlessly or reflect. Perhaps it's better suited for people it's better suited for people who've already lived a life and have come to many of their beliefs. And if your beliefs overlap with Tolstoy's, then all the better you will enjoy this book. I'll also put my hand up here. I'll admit, perhaps I read this book poorly. Because I read it over the course of 2 months, something like that. So obviously I was reading multiple days at a time, multiple weeks at a time. Now this is probably not how you're meant to read it, and it's maybe better suited if every day you just spend the 3 minutes reading the 4 to 6 quotes that are on that day, and then reflecting, pondering on that every day. But am I going to do that? Ain't nobody got time for that. And I certainly don't feel like reading a book like that where I have to come back to it every day. That honestly, that sounds like a chore, and I wouldn't enjoy that. So it's kind of like the Post-it notes that you have in your kitchen. If you ever had those where it was you're meant to just like write grocery lists or things on that, but it would have some very faint stuff on one side, maybe a little picture, a drawing. And I remember having one which had quotes on it when I was growing up. I'm not sure if I haven't seen that for a long time, so maybe not there. So overall, what am I going to give A Calendar of Wisdom by Leo Tolstoy? a very mediocre 2.5 out of 10. I can't really recommend this book, honestly, unless you are the person that I described right at the end there, perhaps a bit older, already come to certain conclusions in your life, not really looking for daily actionable things, want the enjoyment of reading a small little thing every day. Perhaps that's what's good for you. For me, honestly, I didn't take much out of this. What are similar books? Meditations by Aurelius is probably right up there, and also actually maybe The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday. Those are probably the closest that I can think of. I haven't read this Daily Stoic. I have read Meditations and done a book review on this channel at some point, or Juan did at the very least. So you could go check that out if that is what you are interested in. So we're going to jump here onto just the final sections. A reminder, this is a Value for Value podcast. If you get enjoyment out of this, I would love if you could return some of the value that I'm providing to you, because this is going to be free, available anytime, anywhere, any place, for anyone. There's not going to be any sponsorships. I'm not going to get any book deals, nor will I read a book that is kind of being thrust upon me or sent to me or anything like that, because that does not interest me. And I want to keep this as free as possible in terms of I'm reading the things that I am attracted to. So that I'm putting all this value to you, so I'm just asking that you return it some shape or form. You can do this multiple ways, sending just a classic like, share, social media, that sort of things. Interact with me there. Leaving a comment, and in particular some book recommendations, things that you think I would enjoy based on past experiences, your thoughts on some of these books. I actually had a couple of comments last week from, let's just see, it's loading the page again, very annoying. These were from DIY_cat9817. Very interesting name. And she just gave a couple of extra insights into The Handmaid's Tale, which I talked about the last week. And there was one thing that she said, which I thought was a good thing to talk about, which was, I said there are no sterile men, only barren women. The implication that it's absolutely men more so than women, but of course it isn't men. It couldn't be. It must be women. It isn't outright stated, but the way I understood it is the issue is actually with men, but they wouldn't ever admit it. So there's one of those things about that book in particular, which was you get this very one-sided story, obviously, from The Handmaid, and so much information is left out in terms of what is actually going on with the other side of the story of what the world is actually like outside of her very small niche bubble. And you have to fill in some gaps. So the gap that I filled in was that it was mostly the women who were sterile, and that the men wasn't particularly as much of a problem. But that's a good thing to point out. And there was a couple other things I said. There's no rules that the wives are infertile. In fact, newly married men are only assigned a handmaid if his wife is unable to bear a child. They can have their own children. They're allowed. It's just uncommon. Once again, because it's told from this one particular point of view, you just generalize. You just go, oh, okay, that's how it is. So thank you very much for those comments. Very helpful to correct me if I say anything else wrong. That's another great way that you can help support this podcast. Correct me if I say something stupid. And then finally, if you want to help support monetarily, because this does take a lot of time, energy, and money, putting all of these things out there, we do have a PayPal link down below which you can use, and I would encourage you to use, and I will 100% give you a call out if you did choose to do that. So finally, this is a live podcast. I do this on a Wednesday, 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. I was saying 9 a.m. quite a few times in the last book review. That was incorrect, 11 a.m. And I have Johnny here. So it's nice. He says, hi, Karen. Nice to see you again. Nice to see you too, Johnny. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in doing this, come and joining. It's very much fun to have you. And I typically stay around a little bit afterwards and chat if you feel like chatting. kind of one-sided because you can only write and I can speak. But nevertheless, it's nice to have you join in. What's coming up for the future? So I am almost through For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. I'm making my way through, I think it's called The Tower and the Square by Neil Ferguson. Halfway through this book right here, Machado de Assis, more than halfway. Let's go. Memórias Póstumas de Brás Cubas, which I'm reading in Portuguese. So we're going to get a little bit of a different review for that one because I'm going to do it all in Portuguese. Psych! No, I won't. My speaking is definitely not good enough to do that, but it will be fun. And I think I've also got Devil Take the Hindmost, a history of financial speculation, which is calling out to me in the corner. I see it there, so I do want to tackle that sometime soon. One, as usual, will just be doing his book reviews as he sees fit, and those will be published sporadically on a Saturday. And yeah, that's it. That's it for today. A little bit of a shorter one, which is good. So thank you very much for joining me, for listening to this. I really do hope you're having a fantastic day, some fantastic reading wherever you are in the world. Ciao for now. Kyron, out.